The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Head to Whole Foods Market to jumpstart your January during our New Year boosting event with savings on feel-good favorites store-wide. Save on organic picks, wellness staples, and more all month long.
Amateur Traveler, episode 917. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about shipwrecks, Swedish pancakes, and sand dunes, goats in inappropriate places, lots of art, and the cliffs of the Niagara Escarpment as we go to Door County in Wisconsin. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Door County. I'd like to welcome to the show freelance journalist Bailey Freeman from atravelingbee.com, who's come to talk to us about Door County, Wisconsin. Bailey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
And this is an odd show because Bailey and I went on a press trip to Door County, and I wasn't honestly sure that I could do an episode on Door County because I was there for 3 full days. We were there for 3 full days. And normally I want to do a week's long itinerary. But this particular press trip had 2 tracks. I was on a track doing a lot of food and arts, and Bailey was on more of an outdoor and adventure track, one that I'm a little jealous of. And I didn't know that I could have spoken up and said, hey, I'll go on that too. And so we almost never overlapped during this trip. We were on a press trip together and didn't see each other more than once a day, I think, or something
I know,
like
that's
that.
wild.
Which means, fortunately for the listeners, we can talk about 6 days worth of things to do in Door County, because Bailey did 3 off doing adventure things, and then I did 3 off doing art things. And we'll start with Bailey with what she did. And then after that and talk about the arts, we'll figure that out later. But Bailey, first of all, let's put Door County on a map. Where are we talking about?
Absolutely. Door County is on the northeastern side of Wisconsin. It's a peninsula that juts straight out into Lake Michigan. It's right north of Green Bay. If you're a Green Bay Packers fan, you probably know where I'm talking about. But
You managed to do
peninsula
that
comes.
without holding up your hand and showing your little pinky being Door
I
County.
know. I had to resist. Trust me.
Clearly,
I'm a
you are
hand talker.
not from Wisconsin.
I am not, but my family is actually. But long story. Anyway, all of that to say, yep, it is up on the northeastern corner. It comes out to a long point. I believe the peninsula is about 70 miles long.
Not very wide.
Not very wide. What is it? 2 or 3 miles? Like
Yeah, 4 miles sometimes.
yeah,
It's
something like
pretty narrow,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it divides the water into what they call the bay side and the lake side, which offer 2 different experiences.
Excellent. And I did not know that you had family from Wisconsin. My mother's family is from Wisconsin going back to the 1850s.
On my dad's side, from all over Wisconsin, but I didn't end up spending a lot of time there when I was younger. So it's nice to come back and come as an adult to see it all.
So you were on this adventure part of this press trip that we did on. What adventures are there awaiting us in Door County?
So Door County is really interesting from an outdoor travel perspective in that it's really accessible. I would put this in the category of soft adventure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Base climbing,
hiking.
you're saying.
There's a lot of hiking, but also I do think that Door County has done a tremendous job in not only just looking at things from an accessible point of view, but really embracing it. There were lots of ramps onto beaches. There were
Mm.
lots of paved areas. So people of all different levels of mobility can enjoy all of the beauty that Door County has to offer, which is really lovely to see and you wish you saw more of. So, yeah, so basically, Door County, it's a beautiful place surrounded by water, lots of forests, and there are tons of state parks and wilderness areas in this kind of small geographical area. And I got to see a whole bunch of them. So, we kick things off with Peninsula State Park. It's where a lot of people go when they first hit the
Mhm.
ground. There are some hiking trails around, but it's most famous for its watchtower that they built, which gives you really great views. And also, that's accessible. It has a ramp all the way up to the top. It's this beautiful wood tower, looks out over the water, and you can basically see how the inlets sort of shape in and out of the bays and things like that. So, it's a beautiful place to get your bearings.
When you say watchtower too, we've got this situated, and this is the one place we overlapped.
Yeah,
Got to
yeah,
do it in the evening, but we're talking about a watchtower on top of these cliffs because
yes.
this is the part of the peninsula that is these big limestone cliffs that is part of the Niagara escarpment. So, in fact, the same escarpment, the same geographic feature that forms Niagara Falls, some distance away from here, is a big U-shaped rock formation in the Great Lakes. And
Right.
you can really see it here because it's very dramatic cliffs. And they built this watchtower 60 feet up on top of one of these cliffs. And I understand that on a clear day, you can see across the bay to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was not there on a day that was clear enough to see the UP.
Same. It was a little too humid and hazy for me as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And you say humid and hazy. It's true. We were there in August, and in general, when I get invited to Wisconsin in August, my natural inclination is no thanks because I've spent a few formative years in Wisconsin in my grandmother's house, and I recall it being hot and humid and a lot of mosquitoes. And one of the interesting things about Door County is because it's the skinny peninsula between water, we lost 10 degrees of temperature from 90 degrees down to the 80s driving out of the Green Bay airport and going up into this peninsula. And
Oh,
so
wow. I
it's
don't think I realized it was quite that
yeah,
much of a
it is
drop.
cooler in the summer and it is warmer in the winter because it is one of the last places that freezes around there. So interesting. They used to say they advertised it to Chicago as your air conditioned recreation area.
Oh my gosh. As someone from Tennessee, that would have me running. Get right on up there. All
Actually,
right.
National Geographic magazine back in the 50s called it the Midwest Cape Cod, which I got when we were there. We'll
Mhm,
talk about the adventure first, but it is also a very artistic community
mhm.
and very quaint little villages and things like that. So
Yeah.
you talked about the park. You
Yep.
were up at the
At
tower.
Peninsula State Park, and we didn't spend a whole lot of time there because we had a lot to do, but that was where we kicked things off, and I think that's where a lot of people, when they first arrive, start. Probably the next state park that a lot of people hear about in Door County is Whitefish Dunes, and Whitefish Dunes State Park is a fascinating place, and we'll circle back around to it later again, but it is home to the highest sand dunes in Wisconsin. And I know Wisconsin is not synonymous with sand dunes, but there are sand dunes in the area. There's Indiana Dunes National Park, not too far. But basically, these dunes form from the wind blowing off of the lake. It picks up dust and sand, and over thousands and thousands of years has built these dunes. And what's really interesting about Whitefish Dunes is they said before we had gone there, they were like, oh, it's covered in foliage and things like that. And I guess I just thought it was going to be dune grass like you're used to seeing. There is a full forest growing on these dunes. So it's really actually very
Yeah.
unique because it has the grass and the trees, but all underneath is sand dunes. And in the state park, there's also a big beach, and there is a little bit of erosion happening there, but it's still quite wide. And on a beautiful day, it would be an awesome place to catch some rays. That's probably one of the other most notable ones that people have heard of ahead of time. And it's beautiful. It's not a super big area, but there is a nice little nature center in there. And a lot of people access it from the water, which I will tell you about here in a little bit.
Hang on just a second before,
Yeah.
let me make sure that I have the right mental picture because this is one of those things that I did not do. So On the other side of Lake Michigan, there are some dunes, and they are big exposed sand dunes. This sounds like it's not that.
No, there's like a wall of sand, but on top there is grass and trees, which
Okay.
is something that I was not expecting to see at all. So they're definitely unique and not what you would normally think of when you think of sand dunes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. The one of the major natural spots that really stood out to me, and I probably could have stayed forever, was this area called the Ridges Sanctuary. So it is actually home to the highest concentration of rare plants in the state, and that's because this area was is formed by the changing lake levels over time. So this dates back, I think, about 1,500 years. And what happens when the lake levels change? They create ridges. Hence the name, and what they call swales. So these swales are the dips in between the ridges, and over
Okay.
time they fill up with plants. And the guide who was with us, Bill, described it as like a grass highway. So what you have are these
Mm.
alternating bands of ridges topped with trees and these grass highways in between, and there are very tangible things that mark the passage of time, which is pretty wild to look at. So when you're
Mm.
visiting, let's say you walk out on one ridge, our guide was like, all right, if we're going to turn to the left, we're going to walk back 500 years. And so that was pretty wild to understand really how much time went into forming each of these things. I'll stop there in case you have any questions, but I've got lots of factoids about this one.
Oh, please go ahead. I love the
So,
factoids.
yeah, it's really unique. And what is cool about it, besides just the fact that it is a fascinating area when it comes to geology, it's home to 25 species of orchids, which, if you're like me, I
Wow.
love doing nature walks and like trying to find all the tiny little beautiful things. And Ridges has that in abundance. And on top of all of that, the area is also home to what is known as the southernmost boreal forest in the entire country, I believe. And a boreal forest is a polar forest, right?
Right.
And so a little piece of that is over here in Door County on the ridges, and it is existing there because of the cold water that comes off of the lake. It creates basically a microclimate. And because of that, this forest is actually in danger because the water is heating up. So as the
Sure.
water heats up and the wind warms up and things like that, this whole area is going to change. But as of right now, there's still a group of that type of forest that you can see. And it's really beautiful. And it does feel like you're somewhere maybe a little bit more remote than Door County, Wisconsin. Um,
Interesting. Yeah, because
yeah.
it is not Arctic by any means. In
Mm-mm.
fact, the water is not warm there. You're not tropical either. But they were
Right.
telling us when we were on the cruise that we did together down the shoreline there that in the bayside in the September time period when it's had all summer to warm up is going to be like 70 degrees water temperature, which is
Hmm.
20 degrees warmer than the ocean outside of my hometown. Not tropical, but not where you would expect to find an arboreal forest.
I was honestly shocked when he said that.
Huh.
And honestly, that is another reason if you do go to Ridges Sanctuary, I highly recommend booking time with one of their volunteer guides. This is a beautiful place for sure just to walk through, but there's so many magical details that you wouldn't know just like on a casual walk. Having someone point all of this
Right.
out and show you these details, it really elevated the experience and was worth the time. We went with Bill Wolf, fantastic. This guy like has every like factoid you could ever want and just tons of energy and also a lot of passion, because I always say one of the things that I love most about my job is meeting people who freaking love the place that they live in and they want
Yeah.
to share that love.
Yeah.
And Bill was that person, and his passion was contagious. And also it does create a sense of urgency about places like this because
Sure.
they are threatened. And the more we know about them, the more that we know how to visit and protect them. It really was a wonderful experience. And if you do have kids, if you're traveling with your family, they have kids programs. They have really great boardwalks that you can take all through the sanctuary to access different corners of
Mhm.
it. So the Ridges is a really special place. And also, if you're into history, it's also home to a set of range lights. So we know about lighthouses. Lighthouses
Right.
were meant to tell people not to come towards certain areas.
Yeah.
Range lights are the opposite. They act as guides. And the way they work
Okay.
is you have two in a line. You have one in the front and then one several yards pretty far back, and there's a light on the top of each one. And when viewed from the water, you try to line up the lights. And if you line up the lights, that's how you know that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
There are these historic range lights right
Mm.
in the middle of the sanctuary, and they are very cool, beautiful, lovely photo op. So if you're a history person, there's something there for you too.
And the reason for lighthouses and range lights in this area, as we learned, is so the road did not go up to the end of Door County until the 1900s. I
Yeah,
think it was
it was quite late.
1912, I want to say off the top of my head. I know I've got it written down in an article that I wrote about it. But so there were a lot of shipping going up and down this 70-mile long peninsula, and a lot of shipwrecks because of some of the shoals and things like that in this area. There are 240, I think, registered shipwrecks in the area, and which will lead us into something that you got to do that
Mhm.
I'm jealous of.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah.
you need lights to tell you where to go so that you don't become number 241. So
Man, that was definitely something I'd like. They had mentioned the shipwrecks prior, but I didn't realize
right.
quite how many there were. And yeah, just to take that segue, I was lucky enough to do an excursion with Door County Adventure Rafting. And so this is different than some of the other boat tours that are
Yep.
available in the area in that you're on basically a high-speed Zodiac boat. So those big inflatable rafts that
Right.
really take off over the water. And that's fun because I don't know. I find it very meditative when I'm on a fast boat. So you're able just to lean back and let the wind like take you. And it was like nice and cool coming off of the lake. So we took our boat to an area called Death's Door. And there is a big story about why it's called Death's Door. It's a translation. I cannot remember the details off the top of my head, but I can bring it back to you later. Anyway.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? We call it semi-heure. Parfait. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
So we took the Zodiac out to a couple islands that are a couple miles, I believe, off the shore. One of them being the very spooky Pilot Island. The Pilot Island is home to an old lighthouse that was built in 1858, and basically the remains of that are crumbling. But what makes Pilot Island very spooky is that it's actually a bird sanctuary. And because some of the birds are cormorants, which aren't actually native to the area, their presence, not to get too gross about it, but their excrement is toxic. And so because there are so many of them on this island, they have basically killed all of the vegetation on the island. So you're left with all of these tree skeletons sticking up in the middle of the water. And it's really crazy when you go up to Pilot Island, the birds come out to meet you. They literally come out to the boat and follow you in. So it feels like seen out of the birds, frankly. and yeah, you get up there. That the island is closed to people because it is a habitat that's protected for the cormorants, which are invasive, and some other native birds that are there. But it literally looks like something out of a scary movie. Everything's whitewashed and crumbling and falling over, but it makes for some good stories. And speaking of the shipwrecks, there are quite a few in that whole area.
Right. That is one of the theories of where it gets its name from, is just literally, this is where you go to die.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is
Exactly.
just, you didn't say it, but it's the straits between the peninsula and the island at the end of the peninsula.
Yes. And I think Pilot Island is not quite all the way to the end of that. I'd have to
Right. I
double
think
check that on a map. But yeah, so just around Pilot Island, I believe there are 3 wrecked schooners just right in that same area. So all of that to say, it's a super interesting place, very atmospheric, makes for some really cool photos. After that, we headed to Plum Island, and Plum Island is a little bit more alive. It's protected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's home to like nesting eagles and deer and all sorts of different things. And you can actually if you have a boat that can dock, you can actually get off and walk around and explore there during the day. And I think it's only open between Memorial and Labor Day, but you can actually explore that one. So that's pretty cool. But one of the cool things about Plum Island is right off the side of the island, like it's only 10 feet down, is a pretty visible shipwreck called the Grape Shot. And I believe it sunk in the late 1800s. But it's crazy. You can see everything. You can see the ribs of the boat. You can see the big, long central hull. And it's literally like looking down and taking a picture of it, which I'm still not used to being able to do in a lake. That's pretty wild that the water is that clear. But I don't think there was any loss of life with that one because it was so close to shore. But it's a pretty interesting view from the top down.
Yeah, so you basically have these straits here right by where Plum Island are in between the tip of the peninsula and Washington Island, which is the end of the peninsula, and Plum Island is in between.
Yep. So yeah, the adventure rafting trip was awesome. We saw the Grape Shot. We also saw one more shipwreck on that same excursion. I can't remember the name now. So you see a couple shipwrecks on the excursion. You see these islands. You get to enjoy just being on the lake. I loved it. I thought they did a great job. That was definitely a trip highlight for sure.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, of the things on your thing, that was the one I was most jealous of.
It was really good. And let's see, I can keep talking. You want me to keep talking?
Yeah.
I got more. So the other really big highlight for me, we headed up to Newport State Park at night. And Newport is Wisconsin's only wilderness state park. And it's the first state park in the state designated as an international dark sky park. So I am a sucker for dark sky parks, and I've had terrible luck with them. Every time I go, it's either cloudy or something's happening. Not at Newport. I was very lucky. We went out, the sun was setting, the moon hadn't come up yet, and you could see everything. You could see the Milky Way reach all the way across from one horizon to the other like a rainbow. And that was just with the naked eye. I took some photos on my camera. I'm not a dark sky like photographer like in my specialty, but I was able to catch like some really brilliant shots. And if you are going to go do that, I suggest bringing your own seating or something to lay on because there's not a whole lot there, but you can go right out onto the beach, just lay back and enjoy the show. It is truly spectacular and truly dark. I've been to some of these dark sky parks that don't feel super dark, but this one was really dark. So that was pretty great.
Very cool.
Yeah. And the one other big activity that I did that differentiated from yours was I went kayaking on the lake itself. And we did this with Door County Kayak Tours, who were wonderful and very flexible. When we had some weather like move through, we were able to finagle things around and be able to go anyways, which was great. But one thing that I did want to mention about this experience, if you have been kayaking before, I love kayaking, but I love kayaking on rivers and traditionally lakes. Sea kayaking makes me sick. What you should know about kayaking on Lake Michigan is that it's more like kayaking on the ocean than it is on kayaking on a lake.
It's an inland sea. Lake is a
bit of a misnomer.
It's very Midwestern. What do I want to say? Modest.
Yes. But yeah, because the thing is, the lake doesn't have tides like an ocean, but it does get pushed around by the wind, and that creates those waves and that undulation. If you do get a little motion sick, it's something that you should know about. Maybe put on one of those patches before you head out.
I was a little surprised you were kayaking on that side of the peninsula because the lakeside has rougher water than the bay side.
Yes.
And so it was interesting because I guess there are two kayak outfitters now on the lakeside.
Yes. And what was also maybe that's strategic because one of the coolest features when we're going along the side of the coast on the lakeside are these half underwater caves that have been hollowed out basically by these waves that keep pummeling the limestone, right? And it's underneath the cliffs. So if you're standing on the cliffs, you're actually over them. But yeah, we were able to go with our boats underneath into some of these caves. And there was one that had that trilobite fossil that was visible, and it was about as big as your face.
Amazing.
So that was pretty cool. So I think if you're wanting like a more calm and like leisurely kayaking, go for the Bayside. If you want kind of something that has a little more adventure element to it, but also if you're a rock nerd, then I would go on the lakeside because that was pretty neat stuff. So we entered the water a little bit north of Cave Point State Park, came around the edge and ended up taking out at Whitefish Dunes. So yeah, that was
So
that
you
whole
were
trip in a
fairly
nutshell.
far south then. You were halfway down the
Yes.
peninsula. Okay.
Yes. Hmm.
I
Hmm.
thought perhaps you had gone in from Bailey's Harbor. That just would have seemed appropriate, but
So that was the closest town, but
okay.
I think we were a little bit south of it. Like we were like 15 minutes south of that. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And yeah, so those are the major adventure elements that I did on my trip. And I think what I just really liked to see was how accessible and you can do whatever you want and whatever fits your level. And while we're talking about just like outdoor adventure in general in Door County, I think they said they have over 50 public beaches, which is
Right.
pretty amazing. So you're going to have somewhere you can go and relax and enjoy the water, which is why you're going there in the first place.
And the other thing that you and I both did together with the whole group on the water that was a little step down from doing the kayaking or the Zodiac was the cruise along the northern side or the bay side of the peninsula from Sister Bay down towards the state park as well, down to Peninsula State Park. And I
Hmm.
think we went all the way to Fish Creek. So we started in Sister Bay, which
Hmm.
is from the Native Americans there. There were two islands off the coast of Sister Bay, so it's named after the two sisters, and that is a Swedish community, or was originally founded as a Swedish community. We went to Al Johnson's Swedish restaurant there, got our lingonberries and Swedish pancakes, and I think many people got their Swedish meatballs as well. The most notable thing about Al's is on the roof.
Yes. we
There are
had,
goats
had
on the
some people
roof of
doing it.
Al's. It's a grass
Goats.
roof. And it started as a practical joke. Somebody, because they had made a grass roof, thought it would be funny to put goats up on the roof. And it got to be a thing they do, except on the hottest days or the coldest days. You can find goats on the roof of Al Johnson's Swedish restaurant. But just across the street from there, you can hop on a boat tour and cruise down. And as you're going down the coast, they're telling you the history of the area. They're telling you about the Niagara Escarpment. They're telling you that the road didn't go through till 1910. I looked it up while you were talking, and how the sea really affected so much of what they were doing here. So, for instance, when you're in Fish Creek, we saw that boathouse that had graffiti all over it. And they're saying that's not just graffiti, that is tradition here because there were so many shipwrecks that the people on the ships would write their names on the boathouse that indicated this was the last time I was seen above water.
Whew.
And so it's yeah, it becomes a tradition there that if you go to Fish Creek and you see the boathouse there, they still have it on there. But we would sail by Ephraim, I think is the way they pronounce it. I would
Hmm.
want to say it in the Hebrew pronunciation of Ephraim, but that is not how they pronounce it in Wisconsin. That was founded by the Moravians. I think it was the Norwegian Moravians. So Protestant, the oldest Protestant sect, going back to the 1400s, and John Hus, and the rivalry there between the Lutherans and the Moravians because one steeple was made larger than the other. And they finally chopped off the top of one steeple so they'd be exactly the same height. And the law in the town is that nothing can be built taller than the steeple of the Moravian or the Lutheran church. But that was the last dry town in Wisconsin, really coming up just not that many years ago, that they finally allowed beer and wine to be sold. No hard liquor still in Ephraim. But fascinating area. They'd point out the state park as you were going by and point out the house of the guy who used to have a pipe organ in his house and used to serenade people as you would go by in your boat or take your time on the beach. So that was an enjoyable, very leisurely activity to enjoy some time on the water. I was surprised when they told us most people who go up there don't spend any time on the water because why else would you go to Door County?
Some people just like to look at it, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
fine too. And that is definitely I love big views and
right.
usually we associate that with mountains and things, but that was one of the things that I just found very striking as someone who really hasn't spent a lot of time in the Great Lakes area is just how sweeping the water views are. And like that's literally from the minute you walk to the coastline. And there's some really
Right.
amazing sunsets. So you can see sunrise on one side of the peninsula, sunset on the other. And that's pretty fun.
Yeah, we actually walked up to Eagle Tower in Peninsula State Park that you mentioned earlier,
Mm.
right around the time of sunset, and we're getting some sunset like light over the bay.
Looks like cotton candy. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we did that you didn't get to do as much is when National Geographic said it's like the Cape Cod of the Midwest. One of the reasons they did that is this has become a center for the arts. And we spent a lot of time going to artist studios and seeing theater presentations in the evenings. There are 100 different artist studios in Door County. And again, it's, 70 miles long, but it's not that wide. So it's quite amazing how much you can see in that area. And all the artists we talked to, I think Tool One said there's no other place they would want to be an artist. And so it was just interesting. They said the community there is just very close and very supportive. But we went to a glass blowing studio, for instance, the Popple Trenchard Gallery and Glass Studio, and got to see a glass blowing presentation. I don't know if you've had a chance to see glass blowing, Bailey, but it's always very fun when you get a chance to see somebody blowing glass, or if you've had a chance to blow glass yourself.
That I have not been able to do. I have seen it, and I'm always so impressed at how quickly you have to work
Oh
because
yeah, yeah.
everything has to stay a very specific temperature and shape. But yeah, I've not had a chance to do it myself. So
Yeah, if I were in my home studio, which I'm not, I'm in a hotel room today, I would have a glass bowl within reach on my left that I blew at the Corning Glass Museum in Corning, New York. But
that's
I
amazing.
still always enjoy seeing somebody blowing glass there. And we had a chance to go down to a painter, Mark Anderson, is one of the newer artists in the area, and he does a lot of his paintings plein air, so outdoors in the open air. And they were telling us about plein air competitions that he would compete in.
Wow.
And so you go down there, they take your canvas, they sign the back of it and date it so that they know that this canvas was blank when you got there, and that the painting that you are bringing in is representative of something that you basically painted this weekend during this competition. And so he had
Wow.
just beautiful gallery, and all his works, a lot of them were from the local area, some pictures of the Niagara escarpment and things like that, and beautiful use of light. I just loved walking around some of his. And we went to the Edgewood Orchard Galleries, and they have a great outdoor sculpture garden.
Oh,
So it's a
lovely.
quite a lovely gallery in itself, but it also has this beautiful outdoor sculpture garden that walks through the woods, and you can see some larger sculptures that are out there. Sculptures of a horse made out of old iron bits and things like that. It's very enjoyable. The different kind of things we saw. We went down to the Capert Contemporary Gallery, and Capert, what is her first name? Ginny Capert is the artist in residence there, and her work is abstract landscapes. I think of a lot of birch trees and things like that, but it's oil and wax. And I've never seen this. She demonstrated it for us.
Wax.
And there's a video on my website. She makes it in layers, and then she'll scrape down, for instance, to some of her previous layers, and it'll be like 40 layers in these paintings, where the birch trees are basically one of the older layers that has been scraped down so you can see it amongst the surreal landscape that it's in and stuff like that. Fascinating to watch. So very interesting area in terms of the arts, in terms of what you can see there. Went to a flower field as well, but this is something, so when you go back, you can find a potter studio there. 180 Petals was a couple that went up to Door County to make a pottery studio and got sidetracked and ended up doing a flower fields right now and pick your own and things like that. But they're actually now putting in their pottery studio as well. Interesting place for the arts. And that's just the visual arts. That in terms of performing arts, did you see either of the plays that we did?
I saw the second one.
Okay, got it.
Yes, yes.
The Mary's Wedding.
Yes, that's the one. And that was such an incredible venue. What was it called? The
That was the Peninsula Players
Peninsula
Theater.
Players. There it was. Yeah,
Gorgeous
because it was
theater.
covered and made of
Yeah.
wood, but I really loved the open sides. And at one point during the play, it started raining, and it was during this kind of like emotional moment, and it was just like very like soothing and amazing and almost surround sound, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so we went to 2 different shows. We went to one at the Northern Sky Theater and one that you were talking about at the Peninsula Players Theater, and they were very different. I enjoyed them
Hmm.
both. But Northern Sky Theater was a local production. So it was written locally. I think the players were more locals. It was the long awaited prequel to Belgians in Heaven, talking about some Belgian farmers in Door County. And it was corny. It was hilarious. It was funny. It was well done. It was a musical, which I was not expecting, in a outdoor setting in the Peninsula State Park. So it was an amphitheater outside, completely open to the air. And it was very popular. The number of people there, when they asked how many people here were here for our earlier performance today, who raised their hands, it was like half the audience had stayed for a second show.
Wow.
I don't really think of doing a doubleheader in outdoor theater. And so that one felt like a more community, more like getting in touch with Door County sort of thing, where the one that you and I went to together, the Peninsula Players Theater, that was a very small production. There were only two actors on the stage of the particular thing that we saw, but it was very high quality theater. It was very professional. This has been around since 1935. Love the play, Mary's Wedding, if you get a chance to see it. You probably won't get a chance to see it here, though. They won't show it again. They won't do the same show again for 20 years.
Oh, 20 years.
20 years. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the advantage of being around since 1935. So they did 5 shows this summer, and they do them every 2 weeks. They switch to a new show, which,
Mhm.
having done some community theater, is just mind boggling to me, because you have to be overlapping. The practicing and all of those sort of things has to be going on for weeks ahead of that. But it's a repertory company where people come and actually stay on the grounds, and beautiful setting. We watched the sunset from there. And
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouthwatering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
just a fascinating place for the arts. We had a chance to see a open rehearsal for Midsummer's Music, which is doing more chamber music in the area. We saw it in the Egg Harbor Public Library. They were just practicing in the sweet place upstairs, but there is musical entertainment as well. In fact, I think the day that we came in, some part of the group went out and saw a concert. I came in too late, flying in from California to see
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I joined that group and it's pretty great. It's on a farm just set off the road and it's called Fish Stock. And it's a concert series that they do throughout the summer. And the gentleman that runs it, his name, I believe, is Steve. His last name is escaping me at the moment, but he is a music industry guy, has been in it for decades, and very much cares about the concert experience for the audience. So he cares obviously about the musicians and all of that, but he has put so much attention into that venue. The sound quality is amazing. It's in a barn, so it has this really warm tonal quality. And also there's light production. It just feels very polished for kind of an informal setting, which was really super cool and interesting. He also is super discerning about the acts that he has. And the acts that we saw it was like kind of folk Americana, some blues, and I do believe at least some of the band was from Memphis originally, but they had come up for this performance. And so there was a lot of heavy guitar, really great vocals, fun lyricism. So it was a really mindfully curated show. So if you're in Door County and you love music and Fish Stock is happening, definitely head over there. It's a music experience that has a lot of heart in it, which is cool.
Interesting. I should say, since I mentioned the Egg Harbor Public Library, there's not clear why this is Egg Harbor, but if you get to the library, they have a collection of egg art
Yes.
that
Yes.
they have collected over the years, because somebody had this collection. In fact, one of the galleries we went to used to have this collection in it, and I think they donated it up to the library. But fascinating, including a real dinosaur egg
I
in
believe that I read on a plaque that the Egg Harbor name came from sailors who were, I believe, racing, and they were throwing eggs at each other across the boats. And so it was the Battle of Egg Harbor, but it was lighthearted.
I've heard a different story that also involved sailors and eggs, so that's why I say I'm not quite sure that I
Oh,
know
I
this
understand.
story.
So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It was on a plaque.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I don't know if they know for sure.
Fair, fair. But yeah, so yeah, I loved Egg Harbor too. It's a really nice little walkable area. And that Hatch Distillery over there is pretty cool with its meads and
Oh,
brandies
yeah,
and such.
yeah. Yeah, so not just a distillery, but a meadery, which is
Mm.
something you don't find that often. So you did get to Hatch.
I did. Yep. You guys went separately. I got in town earlier than everyone else, so I popped over there
Got
and
it.
just
Okay.
tried a few things myself. I do love mead, and I thought they did some nice stuff with it. And
Did
but I
you have a
really,
did you have a favorite?
oh gosh, it was their cherry liqueur that they did,
Oh, interesting. Now,
and so
was that the Viking's blood?
no, that was the cocktail.
Oh,
Then I
got
think
it.
it
Okay.
may have had that involved, but I don't think we've said it yet. Door County is really famous for its cherries. There are cherry trees and orchards all over. It's
Right.
like you'll see it on pretty much every menu. And so they have a cherry liqueur that they make, and it was delightful. And the exact name of it is escaping me, but I think they only have one, and it was really great. So that was my favorite from there.
I know there was a cherry cider, and there
Yes,
was the Viking's blood did have tart cherries, mead
did
with
it?
tart
Okay.
cherries. Yeah. And that was the one that concerned me because they told us that everything was locally sourced. The mead was locally sourced, the honey, they were raising their own honey, which is what you make mead from, and they locally cherries. But I was a little concerned where they were sourcing Viking's blood.
Vikings
So
blood.
they said there was a Viking in the back.
They're like, don't ask, don't ask. You don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
know.
yeah. Don't ask. I actually,
Um,
their limoncello
it's
from
delicious. I did
mead
try that.
was one of my favorite limoncellos that I've tried.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's interesting though is they're also doing wines,
Mm.
and they are doing entirely locally sourced grapes. And so, because it is a cold region in the winter, for those of you who have
Mhm.
been to Wisconsin, in fact, there's a lot of tourism that goes on in the winter up here too, with snowmobiling and things like that. We were not taking part in that in the 80 some degree weather that we were seeing. But because of that, they're not growing your usual like Burgundian grapes and things like that. But there's a lot of grapes that are coming out of, especially the University of Minnesota, is producing basically cold weather grapes. And so their wines that they made that were not meads were only from these local grapes. And we went to a second winery that was Anchored Roots that was doing a mix. They had
Mm. Mhm.
basically been winemakers in Washington State, and they were still sourcing Washington State grapes for their Cabernets and the well known wines that people are used to. But then they were also growing things like Frontenac Gris and Atasque and La Crescent and these grapes that I didn't know. And they were, again, locally sourced grapes that are cold weather grapes, cold hardy grapes. They tend to be a little more acidic. So if your tastes run in those ranges, that's the kind of wine that they're getting from those. And they're doing really only whites, blushes, and maybe medium body reds, no full body reds
That makes
are
sense.
available
Yeah.
with that. But it was fascinating just to talk to the winemaker there, Eric, about the process of as they're trying to invent basically whole brands. Like Ledge Blanc was this new wine that we saw in both places that different wineries have agreed that is a wine made from these particular cold weather grapes.
Oh, that's
So
fascinating.
yeah, so very interesting to talk to. But yeah, I did enjoy the meadery there. I
Mhm.
had never had a limoncello made from mead.
Me neither. While we're talking about drinks, I just wanted to chime in too. We stopped in at the Island Orchard Cidery,
Ah.
and I highly recommend it. It made me realize that I think maybe I've just been drinking terrible cider my whole life. But what they do is really
See,
interesting.
you just missed our last episode of the podcast, which was about Normandy and the wonderful ciders in Normandy. So you
Okay, so
apparently
this is
just need to
really
get to
funny.
Wisconsin and then to Normandy. So
So these ciders are made in the Normandy style.
Excellent.
So
Well, there
that's really funny. So there's a parallel there, but because of that, they are drier, lighter. They have a champagne quality to them, and they are really beautiful and complex. I was just really pleasantly surprised by the variety, and like nothing ever felt cloying. Everything just felt very polished. So if you're up that way, definitely try it out. Island Orchard cider. And what they were saying too is that they make cider specifically from apples that are bred for cider, and you can taste the difference.
yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed that as well.
The other thing we should talk about with food would be cheese.
Ah,
Now,
yes, obviously.
I don't know if you got to a cheese shop or a creamery while you were up there. I think you had to take out early, so you didn't stop at the stop that we made on the way to the airport. And I'm trying to come up with the name of the cheese place, and I'm vamping here.
Oh my gosh, I also can't remember. But yes, cheese. I did not go there, but I did eat a number of cheese curds throughout my time. And
Speaking
I
cheese
think
curds.
squeaky cheese curds. I think the standouts were the one at Wild Tomato Pizza Joint.
Oh, sure. I
They
loved
had
wild
some.
tomato anyway, but
Yes, it was delicious, but their cheese curds were really great, extra squeaky, the way I like it.
so you had it on the pizza, or did you have the separate deep fried battered cheese curds with
I think we had both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had those, but then we stopped at Renard's Artisan Cheese, which is probably where those cheese curds came from. They're one of the local producers and had basically melty cheese sandwiches. They had Monte Cristos and things like that. As long as we were doing some cheese tasting, you could also get your ice cream and things there. But if you wanted to bring home your cheese curds, a little stop at Renard's on the way to the airport would work.
Oh, delicious.
And somehow I left them out of the article. I'm going to have to go back and change the article that I wrote because I went to look for them in the article and couldn't find them. Did you have a favorite meal? You mentioned Wild Tomato, which was a pizza
Yeah.
place,
Yeah,
which I
honestly,
loved.
I honestly would think that was what the standout. I really enjoyed the pizza there. I thought like it was all really thoughtfully done as far as like the ingredients. And they do a special pizza every month where part of the proceeds go to charity, I believe. And
Right.
they had a harissa tomato basil one, I believe, that was just really great. Had a lot of different flavors happening and a depth to it that was nice.
I
So yeah.
had the Mediterranean, which is not at all Wisconsin-ish, with the feta and the olives and the artichoke hearts, and that was
Oh,
wonderful.
so good.
I
So good.
like that one better than the cheese curd pizza, I will have to say.
Ah, fair.
But
Yeah, I liked Wild Tomato, and Wilson's was just a fun time. Wilson's is a diner, an old school diner
and
style
and ice
place
cream parlor.
and ice cream parlor. And that's their claim to fame is their very extensive dessert menu and sundaes that are just enormous. But it's all ice cream made there. Obviously, a lot of cherries are featured. The sundaes are something to write home about. They were delicious.
I did not have a sundae because I had a malt, because I'm a malt guy,
Ah,
and you just
okay.
can't find a good chocolate malt these days. This is a kind of place you'd go because this is where you could find on the jukebox, you could put in Marvin Berry or Buddy Holly or somebody like that. It's very much a place back in time a little bit. Now, they are seasonal, as I recall,
I
because
believe
they
so.
have
Yeah.
a lot of people who, in the area, one of the tough things is finding people who will work in various places who are not college students who are there only in the summertime. They bring
Hmm.
in some people from overseas, for instance, also in the summertime for extra labor. But for instance, when we went to one of the bakeries, we went to McReady. I'm not sure how to pronounce
Hmm.
that, Artisan Bread Company, which was amazing. And they said it was really hard because their big seasons are July, August for the summer season, where they have more help from even people at the big hotels will bring in people who are brought in from overseas, but you have to house them because of the visa they're
Hmm.
on. So it's
Hmm.
something that the larger properties will do. But they have a harder time in October. They have a lot of people who will come up in October for leaf peepings, and so it's difficult to staff some of these places in the fall season as much. But if you do get a chance, Artisan Bread Company. For me, you could just stop there.
Yeah. I'm sold.
Enough said, but the bread was very good, and we had sandwiches. We did not try the soups, but at least one of the members of our party had been there for soups and said you should, whatever they have, you should try it. But I loved the cherry cranberry bread that they had. Cranberries are also grown locally. So that's the other thing there. But wonderful place, wonderful people. Enjoyed going there as well. I think those were the highlights for me in terms of food. That and the Swedish pancakes, as we mentioned earlier.
Yes, for sure.
Very cool. What else do people need to know before they go up to Door County?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Honestly, what is pretty cool about Door County in general, like for me, the selling point is that it just feels very relaxed. If you're gonna go up there, we're not gonna be bustling all over the place. It's a very let's just be and enjoy the peace, which I really liked. And there are different opportunities around the peninsula to
Right.
embrace different vibes. If you're traveling with your family, the place that I stayed, which was Landmark Resort, it feels like you're going to summer camp, but elevated. It had some great pools. The suites were really amazing, great views of the lake, but it had this kind of rustic feel. And I do know some other folks stayed in some really lovely, quaint waterfront inns, which might be better for couples, folks like
Right.
that.
I think
So
everybody
that's
felt like they
really,
stayed in the best place is what
yeah.
it sounded like to me,
So there really
which
is
is
something
cool.
for everybody as long as you're all just there to chill out. And that's what I think is a really great and lovely draw for Door County. So it's a beautiful place. I was, like I said, not super well versed in the Great Lakes area in general. So I was
Right.
really glad I got the chance to visit.
Yeah, no, and if I go back, I want to do some of the things that you did there and get out to Washington Island would also be interesting. Yeah, I stayed actually, speaking of places to stay, I stayed in the Door Hotel. That's DO with an umlaut over it, OR, so double R. And that is a Swedish style hotel in
Hmm.
Sisters Bay. And I think my favorite part of it was the outdoor fire pit area with the Adirondack chairs out on the front lawn. Just a beautiful little spot there, which I enjoyed in the evening.
Sounds lovely.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, you don't know this because you've not heard the show before, but I've got some standard wrap up questions.
Oh, let's
Standing
do
in
it.
the prettiest spot in Door County, where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Ooh, honestly, you're standing in the Ridges Sanctuary looking at the range light. I
Okay,
loved
interesting.
it there. It is just picturesque. And I think, okay, hold on. I'm going to start again. I have two. If I had to choose the prettiest places in Door County, I've got two options. One is in front of the range light at Ridges Sanctuary. It's a beautiful building. There's a boardwalk that leads to it. On either side are these meadows of beautiful flowers. It literally looks like something out of a storybook. It's absolutely stunning. And then my second answer would be from the top of Cana Lighthouse, which is one of the most famous lighthouses on the peninsula.
Okay.
We stopped there briefly just to learn about it. There's a really great little museum inside that talks about what it was like to be a lighthouse keeper. But when you go to the top, it's like 97 stairs. You get to the top, and the view from the top is just this sweeping, gorgeous panorama of Lake Michigan. And so we sat up there for a while, and the cormorants coming by in a V, and you can see the water currents shifting underneath you. You can see where some of the rocks are. And if you have somebody who knows the area, they can point out shipwrecks, things like that. So that view was, and it's pretty much all the way around you.
I think I would probably be in Peninsula State Park up on that watchtower that we talked about, probably at sunset or dusk, because you would be able to see sunset from there. We just missed it, but it was still just beautiful where we were. But I'd have to give a honorable mention to 180 Petals and their flower fields out there. They have some picnic areas and things like that, and it just would be a beautiful place to just hang out.
Oh, that
Cool.
sounds
One thing
lovely.
that makes you laugh and say only in Door County.
Oh gosh. Probably the goats on the roof.
You have to go with the goats.
Probably the goats on the roof. And yeah, I think we'll probably go with that one.
They told us that there's a whole farm where they have the goats. That's where they normally live. And what happens in the morning is they bring the truck up, and whichever goats get in the truck first get to go to hang out on the roof.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
guess it's a treat for the goats to go people watching, or whatever reason they come down. Maybe they come down for the Swedish meatballs. I'm not sure.
Everyone
But
loves a change of scenery.
everyone loves a change in scenery. Excellent. If you had to summarize Door County in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Peaceful and
Yeah,
green
very.
and friendly. Everyone was very friendly everywhere we went. You always felt welcomed. Yeah, so those would be my three.
I would probably just because of what I saw, I would probably throw in arts, but yours are good. Yours are good.
I love it.
Thanks again. Excellent. Our guest again has been Bailey Freeman, a freelance travel journalist, and you can find her work at atravelingbee.com. Now, I don't think if we go there, Bailey, we're going to find an article on Door County because you wrote that for someone else, and it's probably hasn't come out yet.
So you'll find all my past work there, my photography work, that sort of stuff. So yeah, come check it out. Send me a message, say hi.
Where are we going to be able to see your writings on Door County and when?
Different things are forthcoming. Everything is in process. Stay tuned.
That's the disadvantage of being a freelance journalist where you have to pitch things ahead of time.
Yeah.
Will you take this story if I write it? And
Yeah.
then, of course, even after you write it, they may not take that story. There's
It's
always
true.
that.
It's
And
true.
then when you submit it, it may be months until it actually comes out. So it's very different. I love learning about freelance journalism, and it would just drive me crazy, the whole pitch process and living by the pitch.
You got to have the hustle. But if you do want to check out some of the highlights from my trip, I'm super active on Instagram. My Instagram is _traveling_letter B. And in my highlights, there's a whole section for Door County, and I'm going to be pushing out some photo and video soon onto the main feed. So go over there for those highlights.
Excellent. I'll put a link to your Instagram in the show notes. Thanks so much, Bailey, for coming on Amateur Traveler. Thank you for sharing your newfound love for Door County, Wisconsin.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Thanks again to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. They're not just the smartest podcast listeners in the world, they are my favorite. And if you're interested in becoming a patron of the show, getting an ad-free version of the show and also a monthly Zoom call and whatever else you can get, you can learn more by going to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. And special thanks to our latest patron, who is Sandeep Bahadur. Thanks, Sandeep. I think I'm all caught up with listeners' comments on the show. So I'm always looking for what you think of the show, what can be improved, and what you're getting value out of. So do let me know. Send an email to chris2x@gmail.com. Coming up on the show, we have an episode about Savannah, Georgia, and another one about Majorca. And I hope to have one in the can soon about Madeira. So stay tuned for that. Stay subscribed and get those versions. New on the blog is my magnum opus on traveling to Majorca. Is Majorca worth visiting? Yes, but maybe not for the reason that you think. So check that out. It's almost 4,000 words on what we did in Majorca. You can also hear more about that coming up on the podcast, probably the first Saturday in November. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral.